Hey everybody, welcome to our November Seed Steward second generation potluck. Today we're going to be exploring winter melon, which is really nice. I feel like as we move into winter, we get to explore some of the foods that feel so seasonally appropriate, like these nutritious, fortifying foods that store deep into the dark days of winter, long after fields have been cover cropped or snowed over or what have you. I know that winter melon is a food that stores for months on end and just has so many sort of culinary and medicinal histories to it. And for me personally, I really love learning more about foods that were sort of like resiliency and survival foods for our communities that are so appropriate for our bodies and our community at this particular time of the year. And winter melon, it's yet another food and plant that has such a range of culinary and cultural traditions across so many parts of East and Southeast Asia. From being eaten in nourishing soups to being prepared for special dessert options. It's also interesting because it's the only species in the Benicassa genus. And even though there's a couple of different sort of common varieties that people know, some being more long and cylindrical and others being more round and squat. And there's also actually a lot of people who utilize other parts of the plant other than the fruit. So I'm not sure if we'll hear about that today, but I know that all parts of the plant have been used for medicine and for food. So winter melon it's not a food that I personally grew up with or had a significant relationship with when I was young. So I'm really looking forward to learning and hearing from our guests today and, hearing about their experience with building a relationship with this food. And so today we're super lucky to have several guests joining us. We have CY Chia of Lion Dance Cafe. CY is going to share about some of their culinary preparations and explorations for winter melon. But first, we're going to welcome Stephen and Elizabeth of Tian Tian Farm. They grow Asian heritage vegetables for the Seattle, Washington area, inspired by their Chinese and Taiwanese American backgrounds. So they're going to share about sort of their adventures growing, eating, and selling winter melon in the Pacific Northwest. So Stephen and Elizabeth, the floor is yours.
Hi, I'm Steven.
I'm Elizabeth.
And this is a little bit about us. Our farm is called Tian Tian Farm. Tian Tian means daily in Mandarin. We're first generation farmers. Oh, you were gonna do this slide, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. We are first generation farmers, so we're pretty new to this. We started last year. We started our farm in 2021. And we lease a half acre of land on Vashon Island, which is an island in Puget Sound that's kind of like a little bit south and west of Seattle. It's like a 20-minute ferry ride from the mainland. We have a sandy loam soil, which is great. And yeah, as Kelly mentioned, we specialize in Asian heritage vegetables.
Just a little bit of background information to get us situated. Kelly went over some of this, but this is winter melon. That's the scientific name, and I'm not going to try to pronounce it. It's in the cucurbit family. It's native to South and Southeast Asia, but it's grown all over the continent. Those are some other names for winter melon: wax gourd, ash gourd. Some names that I believe are Hindi that I'm not going to try to pronounce, and Chinese preserving melon, because as mentioned earlier, it has a really long shelf life. The younger fruits have these little fine fuzzy hairs, and then They can be kind of prickly, and then the more mature fruits, they form this like wax coating that also increases its shelf life. And they can get really, really big. They can grow up to like 30 inches long. And then down there's the source for this information.
So here are just some photos of different types of winter melon, and you can kind of see how they can tend to be like pretty cylindrical and very long. But then there's also varieties that are more round, kind of pumpkin-y. And you can also see how in some cases there's trellising. So there's a couple of different ways I think that you can grow it, and we'll get into that a little bit as well. So when we were thinking about growing winter melon, it sort of started last year, late in the season, but the things that we were thinking about was how big winter melon can get and how we have half an acre to grow on. And we also go to market in a Subaru. And then like when we can't fit everything in the Subaru, we bring the Prius. So we just don't have a lot of space to bring everything. So we settled on the small round gourd, which is from Kitazawa. And it's, I would say like the smallest ones that we've ever harvested that were edible were about the size of a softball. And then like the biggest ones were about the size of a volleyball. And those weighed about 4 to 5 pounds. So they're like the ones that we're growing are not massive.
Yeah, it's good for like 2 people. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in 2021, winter melon was kind of an afterthought. We were at like, it was our first season, right? And it was like midsummer, and it was actually early spring, and we were like,
seeds in April, so there's no way we seeded them earlier than that.
okay. And we were like, we need more winter and fall crops, and winter melon was one of them. And we direct seeded them pretty late. We don't have records on that. It was our first season. And then sometime in October, we harvested them all at once. And so that was our 2021 winter melon season. And then in 2022, we seeded our winter melon into 72 cell trays and before we did that, we soaked our seeds for 24 hours and we germinated them on heat mats. And then we took them off the heat mats after they had germinated, and we potted them up on May 2nd. So about 3 weeks after we seeded them into these little 4-inch pots that are really cheap, the like side of the road pots for us. And then the bed that we transplanted our winter melon in was amended with compost and kelp meal, which is what we did on all our beds, because we're not at a point yet where we're like specializing different beds with different amendments. As mentioned earlier, we transplanted one 50-foot bed with 12-inch spacing between our plants, a single row. And we did that on June 6th. So about a month and 3 weeks after we first seeded them. We used landscape fabric that we burn holes into to keep down the weed pressure. And our winter melon got 2 lines of drip tape, which had about an hour of water a day. And we did not trellis our winter melon. We just sort of let them sprawl on the ground.
And here's what that looked like. So you can see in the photo kind of like on the left-hand side-ish, you can probably see the purple eggplant plants. And then the next bed over is the winter melon that's sort of like limey light green. And then the next bed over is cucumbers, which are trellised. So you can see that like the winter melon really sprawled. It really took over everything on all sides of it. Our beds are 30 inches with a 12-inch aisle, so everything's pretty tightly packed together. And I think we found that we should give them more space next year, because they really just like kind of started weighing down the eggplant and getting really tangled up in the cucumbers, and just generally made everything more like tangled and difficult to work with. But it was also nice to see that they were growing so well that they were just taking over everything.
So we had our first harvest, a single winter melon, on September 20th. And then after that, every week for each of the 2 markets we go to, we harvested winter melon, for a total of about 130 pounds yielded from that 50-foot bed. When we harvested them, we were careful because the exterior can be a little prickly. It's pretty unpleasant. We just store them in our barn, which is outdoors, I guess, or at like room temperature. We didn't test this. We didn't test the limits of the storage, but according to the literature, and as Kelly mentioned earlier, you can store it for months. And we're still sort of like learning when to harvest the winter melon. You'll see in a photo later that not all of the fruits we harvested had much of a wax coating on them. And so maybe they wouldn't last as long, but we ate them and they were just fine. And in late October, we came back from a trip after not going to market for a week. And the weather started to turn a bit colder, and our winter melon started to form like little rot spots. And then some of them were really rotting.
So our outlet for selling winter squash was primarily 2 farmers markets, and I would say like the vast majority of our winter melon sold through that. We also sold about 20 pounds through a wholesale distributor, which sold them to 2 organizations that focus on providing culturally relevant meals to their clients. So at market, we got to have lots of face-to-face interactions with our customers and talk to them about winter melon. And we found that with Chinese customers who are familiar with winter melon, it's really popular, except that some of them were a little confused by like the size and the smallness of them. And so they'd be like, is this winter melon? Is this like, are you sure? So it took a little bit of education there just to explain that we had chosen a smaller variety for the reasons that we've explained. And then for customers who aren't really familiar with winter melon, we had to do a fair amount of education. I think this is for a couple reasons. One, just because it's really new, like not a lot of people would necessarily know about it if you didn't grow up with it. And then the other is that there isn't really like an immediate comparison to other vegetables. It's a melon, but it's savory, and it's also like kind of hairy on the outside. And so we just had to do like a lot of explaining. I think there weren't a lot of people who immediately walked by, other than our Chinese customers who like knew exactly what it was. And as we've mentioned, we had to do a fair amount of cautioning people about how prickly it is. But overall, I think we sold pretty much everything that we could, everything in the field that was good. So it was a good experience.
Yeah, and just in terms of like selling the winter melon, CY might talk a little more about some of these preparations, but just to do a quick overview of Chinese and Taiwanese applications, because that's what we're familiar with. As mentioned earlier, there are many other cultures for which winter melon is relevant. But in our cuisines, there's winter melon soup, which is the only way we've ever prepared it, which traditionally is like some kind of meat broth, winter melon, and like pork meatballs, but apparently you can stir fry it. And then there's definitely winter melon in like Chinese pastries. It has that sort of like jammy, like hard jammy quality to it. And so like a lot of cakes that have that texture is from winter melon. And
It's
then
got a similar consistency to like cantaloupe, just for reference. I think
Yeah.
it's, or like honeydew melon,
yeah,
but it's not sweet.
and then you can also have the winter melon in bubble tea. Yeah. That's our winter melon at market. You can see the stems are good for handles. Oh, you're gonna say
And then you can see like in the middle, there's the greener, darker green melons, which have started to develop the waxy coating, and then the lighter green ones that haven't. And so we're like, this is still definitely work in progress for us, because we're trying to figure out when is like kind of the peak time for us to harvest them, like when are they most ripe, before, you know, like before they start getting to being too ripe and rotting. So I think through trial and error, we figured out that these are all harvestable and edible, but we could probably fine tune that and figure out which winter melons are at their peak for eating.
So next season, we want, like we mentioned before, we're gonna have some more space for winter melon. We might try growing like a bigger variety. And then we're talking about maybe having some materials that we can hand out to customers, like recipe cards or informational pamphlets, just to so we don't have to do as much verbal education at market.
Okay.
And so, we can talk a little bit about winter melon. I did eat some winter melon growing up, but I have a special guest here who knows a lot more about winter melon, which is my dad. So you just get talk a little bit about his experience eating winter melon, and I'll let him take it away.
Hello, I'm Roger. I was born and brought up in Taiwan. Over there in Taiwan, we eat lots of winter melons, and it's a very common dish. Pretty much every household will eat it, and I believe it's because of it's available. They grow lots of them, easy to grow, and it's inexpensive. So every household buy it. One thing I never understand is why the name winter melon. It's really harvested between midsummer till late fall. And it really has nothing to do with winter, but it's named winter melon. So if anybody knows why, please let me know. And we usually eat winter melon with a soup. You cut it to like this big piece, and then you can boil that with the chicken or ribs. And then definitely put some ginger. Somehow winter melon and ginger, they all come together always. I don't know why, but that's one of the ways to prepare that. The other way is winter melon, it's really hollow inside. So if you cut it this way, and then you remove the seed, it's like a cantaloupe. You have a space out there. You can put meat and mushroom and vegetable and ginger and water, and then just steam the whole thing. Make half the winter melon a container. It's like a pot, and then you can steam it. It's really delicious. So that's how we used to eat a winter melon. I don't see anybody stir fry it. I don't think anybody stir fry that. I don't know why, but that's how we eat it.
Thank you, Dad.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Does anybody have any questions?
I just had a quick question. It's so interesting how you were sharing that like the Chinese community was like, oh, these are so small for winter melon. And then, you were doing some education for people that weren't familiar with it. What was sort of like the the selling point or like the coaxing point for people who weren't familiar with it? Like, how did you kind of make that bridge to people who didn't know the plant, for them to be able to try it or want to try it? Because it's such a big fruit. Even the small ones are pretty big.
I think that like, it just happened to start to turn cold when we were bringing the winter melon to market. So we really pushed it as a like a stew and soup ingredient. I think in an earlier slide we had written Chinese comfort food on our little chalkboard, and I think we used that language too when we were describing it to customers.
I think also like a really helpful selling point was offering like explicit instructions for how to use it. So it wasn't just like, oh, you can make soup with it. It was like, okay, so you peel the outside with a knife. Don't use a peeler. You cut it up. You scoop out the seeds, and then you use a clear broth and you add these things. And so I think kind of like sending them off with specific instructions and ideas about what to do with it probably helped. And then I would say we also we have certain customers who are more like open to trying new vegetables or vegetables that are new to them than others. And it wasn't like completely predictable who would buy them, but from our repeat customers, like there's certain ones where I was like, you've tried everything at this point, like you're gonna try this too. Yeah.
Thank you. If anybody else has questions for Stephen and Elizabeth, feel free to jump in. And thank you so much, Stephen and Elizabeth. I loved seeing your photos and also kind of just your learning journey of building a relationship with growing the plant. The photo of the eggplant and the winter melon was pretty wild. Seemed really jungly.
Yeah.
And
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And there may be more questions after that folks come up with. But if this sounds good, we'll shift to bringing up CY, and they will talk about some of their culinary adventures. So let's see.
Yeah, so first of all, I really enjoyed that presentation. It felt very like comprehensive. And yeah, there's a few things that you mentioned that made it so challenging but interesting for us to come up with winter melon recipe for this. But first, I'm CY, and this is my partner, Shane. We own Lion Dance Cafe in Oakland. We do mostly Singaporean Chinese cooking, and the restaurant is all vegan. And yeah, I grew up in a Teochew Chinese family in Singapore, and so winter melon, like you mentioned, it was always in soups or stews or stir fries, or sometimes in some like cookies. Sometimes it was stuffed whole with different aromatics and steamed that way, but that's what my family has kind of told me about when I asked them about their favorite ways to prepare it. I've never actually seen that specific method being made. But for today, we wanted to come up with something that was more, I guess, just different. I kind of went down a rabbit hole about winter melon, and my family isn't vegan or vegetarian, but they do observe some vegetarian traditions, especially around Lunar New Year, and just even in terms of traditional cooking at home, I didn't grow up eating a lot of meat at all. So I came across this text that mentioned that winter melon in Chinese Buddhist vegetarian cooking has been used historically as a replacement kind of for pork belly fat because of its texture, how even when it's cooked through, it still retains like that little almost gelatinous quality. So I thought, well, in Singapore, fat is something that is really treasured and that tends to be like really added as a topping or a main ingredient of things where it's used. So I thought of just like kind of coating it in a starch and frying it, and how that could transform the winter melon into something that it's just a lot different than anything I grew up eating, despite the fact that we're gonna prepare it with a very simple like a series of traditional easy to find ingredients still. So I'm going to move, we're in the kitchen, I'm sorry if it's a bit loud. I'm going to move my laptop around to where we have all the ingredients laid out, and Shane is going to introduce every one of them.
Okay, so this
So
is
we have
Scott of Shashan Farms, beautiful winter melon. We broke it down, peeled it, cut it into about maybe 1/2 inch slices. And we just toss it in a bit of rice flour. The finer the rice flour, the better. We use this sort of Thai rice flour. So what's important about that is that it's first, the rice is aged, then soaked, then ground, then dried. It's really important, very fine texture, really absorbs moisture really well. And then we fried it. So we just like tossed it simply with that rice flour, fried it. You can do it once or twice. Once is good, twice is better. You just, once it's coated, you fry it, drain it for a few minutes, then deep fry it again. Now we can move on to our ingredients that we're going to use for our sauce. So we have some aromatics. Yeah, we have some aromatics. We have our saucy components here and some dried ingredients here. So we're going to start by stir frying some ginger, red jalapeno, garlic, and shallot in some shallot oil. So we get our shallot oil by frying our shallots. Fried shallots are a great accompaniment to so many dishes. Our dried components are simply coriander seeds and can you say it?
Tochu.
Tochu. We make our tochu in the restaurant. This is what we get here. This is what we use. We use diaspora code chilies. We use local ginger when we can, black soybeans and stuff, but this is what you're gonna find in the store. We just,
Yeah, like dried black beans or fermented or salted black beans is what you'll find it labeled as usually.
then to our saucy components, we have our shaoxing, cooking wine, just white sugar, white vinegar, and light soy sauce. And those are all the components of the dish. And now with these, I'm gonna just assemble a dish. So we have a wok. It's gonna get pretty loud and sizzly. So I'm gonna move some things away. Oil. Going with the fermented soybeans. Going to toast the coriander that's ground already. It's smelling extremely fragrant. It's really nice. Gonna deglaze a little bit with the shellfish. If I was doing it on a gas stove, I could get a little bit of flame, but it's all right.
The gas stove really sets off our hood, which would be too loud to record in here.
And the sugar goes in. And I put the vinegar and the light soy sauce in at the same time. Then so that's my basic sauce, our basic sauce. Then the winter melon goes in. The starch that
so
is
the
coated,
Winter melon has been fried previously.
the rice flour that is coated the winter melon is going to act to thicken the sauce. Then I'm gonna just add a little bit of chopped cilantro. I'm gonna cut the heat. And plate it. And just a little bit of chopped cilantro on top. And there we go.
And that's just like really savory, still pretty crispy, which is a texture that we're not used to enjoying with winter melon. And the inside, you don't want it to get too soft. It's really wonderful how winter melon keeps this like really kind of like, yeah, like someone mentioned, like cantaloupe firmness. Yeah, this is just a dish that's really good over rice or really good with a beer. Yeah, we hope you'll give it a try and that you'll enjoy it.
Pretty good.
And yeah, that's the end of our recipe.
Any questions?
Thank you so much, you two. I so wish I could try that. The sauce looks so savory and yummy. And I love how you mentioned, your kind of thought process of thinking through winter melon as sort of like a replacement texturally for fat. I thought that was super interesting. I'm curious how you kind of, because it seems like this preparation is a super different preparation from what you grew up or were used to eating. How did you come to the idea of making this specific sort of like sauce and type of components?
That's a really great question. So yeah, although I'd never had fried winter melon before, all the ingredients are ingredients that I grew up using, that I grew up like tasting in my family's cooking. So yeah, it just felt like, why don't we make just a simple sauce that is really savory with black beans, alliums, a little bit of yeah, coriander, because my aunties always put coriander in everything. And a little bit of vinegar to keep it bright, because you want to balance the flavor of having something like fried that's a bit heavier. So yeah, it just kind of balancing, I guess, like familiar with less familiar.
Yum. Thank you. Does anybody else have questions for CY and Shane? Do you have an official name for the recipe?
Oh, I think just I guess like crispy black bean winter melon would be what we would call it if we put it on the menu.
Nice.
And yeah, something that I kind of like expressed before we started recording. Yeah, is that yeah, we're really excited to be able to do this, and yeah, it's just like this was just a really good opportunity for us to like come up with something a bit different than what we do every day at the restaurant. So really appreciate that. And also it was amazing to get to work with Scott of Shashan Farms, and Dongguo, of course, because it's just like so just grown with so much care, like you can really taste it.
All of Scott's produce, you can really taste the intention.
Yeah.
Like we have some of his chilies fermenting right now. So delicious. I taste them every day as they progress. Really good.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're so appreciative. And I think that, yeah, CY will share the recipe sometime in the future too, so that folks can practice making it on their own.
I've got a quick question. CY, are you excited? Do you think you'll share this recipe with your family and give them a new way to try winter melon?
So my family actually is a bit weirded out by my cooking. Yeah, everyone still lives in Singapore, and a lot of my family kind of still makes the same recipes that my ama used to make. And so anytime I kind of bring in like well, anytime we visit, they're like, oh, cook for us, but we just know that anything we cook, even if it's to us seemingly very close to the food that I grew up with, to them it'll seem just like really foreign. So yeah, that's a great question, but I think there's just such yeah, kind of like a generational, but also like we're just not only generationally separated, but also different chapters in terms of the diaspora. That they're very kind and very supportive, but they don't get it what we're doing, and honestly, like that's okay. Yeah, but that's a great question. And I see someone commented mine too. Yeah. I'm glad others can relate. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Hey, thanks so much for sharing. That looks so tasty. I was wondering when you go shopping for winter melon, and obviously you're buying from Scott, and like, do you look for anything? I don't really know, but I know like when you're looking at watermelon, if you knock on it a certain way, sometimes you can tell if it's going to be tasty or not. But just curious if anything goes through your head.
That's a great question. Yeah, so this is the one we got from Scott. This is a small segment of what was really like a huge winter melon.
So yeah,
Go ahead.
Basically the riper it is, I mean it with watermelon actually and other melons that tend to grow on the soil, the lighter part indicates the less photosynthesis, right? So there's less chlorophyll on the side that has grown like for a long period of time. On top, it's darker. So it just depends. It really depends, because like for us, depending on the cooking method, we want something that's more ripe, then we want something that has sat on the ground, that has been on the ground for a longer time, right? It's been growing and it's been exposed to sun a lot more. This is where all the dirt was actually on Scott's, like, so this is where I focus my scrubbing. But on the top, it's more green. So it depends. Do you want something more that's more like bright, maybe malic acid, like sort of appley, acidic, that can happen in cucurbits, like when they're really green? Or do you want something that's more like maybe going to lend itself more to a sweeter application? So if it has like a large light spot on the bottom, can also kind of tell by the shape, like it's a bit flatter here than it is up here. So it kind of grew, like it settled here a little bit and then it grew up. Maybe there was something right here that was obstructing it or something like that. But and then with the smaller ones that are, sorry, I'm really terrible with names, but our friends from Puget Sound, we also can find those smaller ones here in the Bay. They have super thin skins. You like, for this, we peeled the skin, but the smaller ones, we didn't find it necessary to peel the skin. And they're just like super tender, like throughout. You don't need to peel it. Yeah, so it's like it really depends on, sorry,
I think
to answer your question, I don't have an answer actually.
I think if you're trying to make a larger recipe, go for one of these farmers market stands where you can buy like by the segment, and this way you can see like how tight the texture looks, how many seeds you're gonna have to work to take out, how spongy or how firm the flesh is, depending on the recipe you're gonna use it for. But if you're just doing something for 1 or 2 people, like at home, I think if you can find like a smaller one, because those are so, yeah, just like so much softer and more tender, and you won't even need to peel it. I hope that answers your question.
Definitely. Thank you so much. I love seeing the way you guys are thinking about it.
Yeah, are there any other questions?
Well, thank you so much, CY and Shane and Stephen and Elizabeth and Stephen's parents. Thank you all so much for joining us today. It was super informative and interesting to hear about your all's relationship building and experiments and adventures with Winter Melon. And I hope that people are inspired to kind of build their own relationship with this plant and food that's super kind of, on point for the season. Just to share with folks, in case folks haven't heard, next month, Second Generation Seeds is hosting a chili pepper showcase and symposium. It's an in-person event on December 11th. So there will be a number of chefs and farmers kind of showcasing the different Asian chili peppers that they've been working with and growing, and the little bit of a lecture component, as well as a chili pepper tasting. I know there are chicken wings involved as well as a tasting vehicle. There are advance tickets required, so if folks are interested in going, you can grab those through Mighty Networks on Eventbrite. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll probably have slightly amended programming next month because of the holiday season, but we will let folks know on Mighty Networks. Thank you so much, everybody, and we will see you soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.